Hello, my name is Christian Mullen. This is Money Mouth Productions, a YouTube channel dedicated to character growth. Today I'm talking about how I got into self-improvement to begin with. I figure it's a pretty important story, give a little context as to why I'm doing this and to why I'm doing what I'm doing. That was a bit redundant. How did I start my self-improvement journey? I started my self-improvement journey in high school, approximately around sophomore year. Back in the dark days, I was a complete nihilistic atheist. So just for a bit of context, let's define our terms, right? So nihilism, basically the belief in nothing, the belief that life doesn't matter, that nothing matters. And atheism is just, you don't believe in God, or you don't believe in any sort of religion or spiritual being or anything like that. So back in these dark ages, I used to watch a lot of YouTube, a lot of YouTube, binge watching for hours. The second I got home from school, I was down in the basement on the computer doing nothing but either watching YouTube videos or playing video games. And I would watch a lot of atheist YouTube videos. I don't really remember the names of most of the channels. One of them was Amazing Atheist. There was another one that was Archangel 6969 or something like that. And basically, it was these dumb little animations of this angel baby and this caricature of what God was supposed to be. And it was basically just making fun of God and taking Bible verses out of context and shit, and just real cringy. So I don't exactly know where this atheism phase of my life came from. I used to go to what was called CCD, which is basically school after school, but for learning about the Bible and, Christianity. And I hated school as it was. I still do. Yeah, that really hasn't changed much. So I was definitely resentful at the fact that I had to go to school after school on the worst day of all days, which we all know is Monday. Anyway, my social circle at the time, or at least there was one prominent person in my mind at the time, was also a big atheist and communist. And I was a very impressionable person back then, so I was also very, very nihilistic. So I would pretty much cling on to anyone's word for the sake of seeking approval, essentially. A huge part of that is just complete narcissism. So I was very self-absorbed in high school. I was only really ever thinking about myself, and that tends to lead to a lot of issues, because when you're only thinking about yourself, people tend to think that you're a selfish asshole. And for the right reason. Let's talk a little bit about nihilism. So when life is meaningless, when life has no meaning to it, it doesn't really give you a whole lot of motivation to do anything at all. And so that is precisely what I did, is absolutely nothing. As I said earlier, come straight home, hop on the computer, either playing World of Warcraft, Star Wars, or just watching YouTube videos. And that leads to a very depressing life and lifestyle. So narcissism. Going back to narcissism, I was more focused on seeming cool rather than actually being cool, if that makes sense. I was so concerned about what other people thought of me, and so focused on making sure I seemed cool, rather than just trying to do the actions that would just genuinely make others think, wow, he's a cool dude. So by artificially trying to create this character of the mysterious cool guy, you actually end up becoming this weird, lonely, loner loser who is a bummer to be around because he's always negative and very depressing, argumentative. If you like anything at all, if you express any sort of joy for anything at all, you'll shoot it down because you want to seem cool, because cool people don't like anything. That was, I guess, how my mind was running back then. Anyway, so this mentality, this lifestyle that I found myself in, It was pretty bad. I was so just lonely and unbelievably bored that it physically hurt at times. I would be sitting in my room. I distinctly remember sitting in my room and like laying on my chair, like belly on my chair, just kind of like swinging around back and forth and thinking like, oh wow. So this is what it feels like to be going crazy. Like I must be going crazy right now. Yeah, I really had nothing to do because I didn't really have any friendships with anyone. I pretty much cut everyone off at some point, burned pretty much all my bridges, so I really couldn't, or I didn't believe that I could reach out or call anyone or, you know, ask if anyone wanted to hang out because I had believed that I had put myself in this box as the loner who sits in the back of the class that no one talks to. That was a false self-perception that I had encased myself in. So basically all I would do is just, you know, like I said earlier, watch YouTube videos, and I would play the same video games over and over and over again. And it would be pretty much, so Fallout 3 for one, Fallout New Vegas another, which I still play every once in a while. Fallout New Vegas hasn't let me down yet. Civilization 5, this game called Darksiders, Infamous 2, like just the same games on repeat over and over and over and over and over again, and it was the exact same experience every time. What I believe now, looking back, what I was doing is I was definitely seeking for some sort of meaning. I felt like, oh, I'm starting a new game. Like this is a new chapter in my life. Like this somehow has some significance to it. And I would get 5 minutes into this new game and be like, this is the same. Like I'm not deriving any sort of meaning from this. And I distinctly remember like my levels of anxiety increasing because I felt this urge, this need to like maximize the amount of pleasure that I was experiencing in any sort of moment. So it would be like Sunday night, right? I know for a fact I'm going back to school the next day. I'm dreading that. So it's like, I need to experience the most amount of fun and pleasure right now before it's all ruined and I have to go back to school tomorrow. And what actually ends up happening is you don't experience any sort of pleasure, and it's just anxiety and depression, and you're really just questioning your existence at that point. So yeah, that's kind of how I lived for years. Typing into Google, what is depression, or am I depressed? And you know, it would list off all the symptoms, and I'd be like, yeah, that's definitely me, that's definitely me. And whether or not I actually was clinically depressed or not, I don't really know. The important thing is I was reinforcing that belief by telling myself over and over and over, yeah, you're depressed, I'm depressed. Yeah, see, Google says you're depressed, so that definitely means that you're depressed and you exhibit all these symptoms. And yeah, all I was doing was reinforcing these terrible false beliefs about myself and actively making my life worse because of that. And I would definitely be lying if I said I didn't experience echoes, if I didn't experience like a residual effect from that. Like I'm still fighting those thought habits that I had instilled in myself like all those years ago. Like I still find myself like getting caught up in some of these just really negative feedback loops. And like I've gotten to a point now where I can recognize it and cut it off before it happens, but it's still, you know, it's a struggle. But we get better. Seeds planted. There were 3 prominent things in my mind at the time. They were pieces of media. There are 3 pieces in my mind that I distinctly remember like planting the seeds of self-improvement and like just sparking something in my heart to be like, you know, you can turn this around. Avatar: The Last Airbender. This show I still think is amazing. I still come back to it every once in a while. I mean, like the last time I watched it was relatively recently, right? So around August or September of 2021 was the last time I watched it. So I still come back to it every once in a while. But the first time I watched it was around sophomore year of high school, March or April of sophomore year of high school, which was about probably around like 2012 or something like that. So theoretically, this was way past my time. When Avatar came out, I was in like 1st or 2nd grade. So that would have been the time that I was supposed to watch it, you know, as a child, being a children's show. But, you know, I'm a slow bloomer, so it took me a while. I finally like sat down and watched this thing sophomore year in high school, and it definitely sparked something in me. I definitely remember being very influenced by this show. All the characters are great. I really resonated with the characters Zuko and Uncle Iroh. So Zuko is like this bratty, annoying, angry teenage kid who gets kicked out of the Fire Nation because he was not mean enough. And Uncle Iroh is also a disgraced general who basically is just looking out for his nephew and trying to get him on the right path. And there was just that's something about that dynamic and that relationship that really planted the seeds of, persistence and determination, which wouldn't really bloom until years later, i.e. now. Also just on the spiritual front, right? Because I had been an atheist up until that point, pretty much. Like, I didn't believe in God. I didn't believe that life had any sort of meaning at all. I knew I was depressed. I was angry. I was very angry, and I definitely didn't want life to go on like this. I guess this show sort of framed spirituality in a way that my mind could latch onto. Obviously, I had these really horrible beliefs about Christianity and God and all this stuff. So there wasn't, at the time, there definitely was not a way for me to latch on to Christianity yet. So I think the seeds of spirituality had to be set in another way. And I guess that came in the form of Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I'm very grateful for that. The second thing was The Dark Knight Rises. Now, The Dark Knight Rises isn't a particularly great movie. Like, looking back at it now, like, there's just a whole bunch of stuff in this movie that doesn't make any sense. But at the time, I thought this movie was absolutely mind-blowing. I thought this movie was the best thing in the world. I think it was just the combination of the actors who were in the movie. I really thought Christopher Nolan was a good director. I really like Christian Bale. I still like Christian Bale. I think he's a great actor. And that Hans Zimmer score, man. I don't know what it was, but like seeing that movie for the first time in theaters, when Bruce Wayne climbs out of the cave and you just hear the wah! I don't know, it touched me in a way that I can't really describe. I was thinking about that movie years after it came out. I was thinking about that movie till senior year of high school. I still think about this movie. It's stupid. But, it was a very influential part of my life, and it's what set me on this self-improvement journey. So the stage for my spiritual experience had kind of been set with Avatar. So, like, my heart had been softened, I was a little bit more open to new ideas, and then I saw The Dark Knight Rises, and I pretty much had a pseudo-spiritual experience with that, like I said, with the Hans Zimmer music, just absolutely mind-blowing. And I definitely related a lot with the character of Bruce Wayne. So I think I had watched The Dark Knight first, and then I had watched The Dark Knight Rises, and after having watched those two movies, I was like, all right, I want to go back and finally watch Batman Begins. So I watched Batman Begins shortly after watching The Dark Knight Rises, and I quickly fell in love with, like, this depiction of Bruce Wayne, because I just really like the idea of, like, separating from society and, like, going into a mountain, like, in the middle of nowhere and training with a master, and, like, coming back as, like, an unknown badass, and like just coming back as an unrecognizable character, essentially. So that was a storyline that had always appealed to me. Yeah, and another thing that clicked in my mind was the fact that Bruce Wayne, Batman, doesn't have superpowers. Like, I always knew this. I had a mantra that went, and the nice version of this mantra is, Batman is the stupid version of Iron Man. So Batman and Iron Man are both rich billionaires. They're both super intelligent, but Iron Man has a flying suit of iron that's bulletproof, and Batman's a dude who runs around in tights and punches people in the face. Very logical argument, but there's just something about the Batman character that is inspiring, and it's really because he had to just train his ass off. He had to study a lot, and he had to work out a lot in order to become the ideal version of himself, which was Batman. And after having watched those movies, like, something clicked in my mind. Like, you could probably do that too. Bruce Wayne doesn't have any superpowers. He just trained to get that. So you could probably do that too. The third of these three things that really sparked my determination, planted the seeds of self-improvement, was the book Ender's Game. Now, once again, I was in high school when I read this, and I really related with the character Ender and his isolation, essentially, even though he did have a social group when he was on the space station and whatever. He was still, for the most part, isolated, and no one really understood what he was going through, because he was essentially the leader. He was like 12 years old, but he was the leader of this whole thing. And the ending of the book, spoilers, if you care about spoilers, whatever, I don't give a shit. The ending, when it turns out like he actually was the one fighting this war the whole time, and that he basically obliterated this entire species, and like finding the queen and finding out that the only reason they were in this war was because like they couldn't comprehend how each other how they communicated, because like the buggers were like all a hive mind, and that's how they communicated. And obviously humans are not hive mind creatures. We communicate with words and stuff. So anyway, the point, yeah, anyway, I just found it very inspirational and motivating and influential. It got me to start thinking in a more empathetic light, trying somewhat to understand things from another person's perspective. So those were the major seeds that got me really started on the self-improvement journey. But what happened after that wasn't very inspiring or motivating. So basically what would happen was I would have these mini revelations of, oh wow, I really can do this, and I'm gonna be the best version of myself. So what would happen was these cycles. I would start doing self-improvement. I would start working out. I would start reading a ton. I would start eating healthier. I didn't know what healthy eating was at the time. I thought eating healthy was eating a bunch of salads drenched in dressing with nothing but, carrots and some bell peppers in there. And then, maybe some toast every once in a while. Essentially like a starvation diet. It was the dumbest thing I could have possibly done, but, I was young and naive and I didn't know any better. The point is, for that, I wasn't able to stay consistent. But that is an entirely different video in and of itself, so stay tuned. The point. Ultimately, I didn't really want life to suck anymore. I was miserable and depressed, and I didn't want to believe that I couldn't do anything to change it. So somehow miraculously stumbled upon the motivation to start somewhere, start something, at least have hope that something could be done about it, even if I wasn't always pursuing it, even if I wasn't being consistent with it. From that point forward, I actually had the hope that something could be done, that my life could be better. Part of the reason why I'm doing this YouTube channel now is because I know for a fact there are a lot of other people living the same sort of life like I was back then, just completely isolated, lonely, depressed, with no hope, no motivation. They believe that life has no meaning at all, that there's nothing outside of tangible reality that we see. And that's kind of why I started the YouTube channel, because I want to be a voice that reaches out and says, nah man, there's a lot more out there. Life does have meaning. There's a lot more to life than just sitting in your room alone and playing video games. It gets a lot better. And it may feel like you're stuck. It may feel like that there is nothing at all that you can do to... Uh-oh, the recording got cut off. Anyway, the point is, life doesn't have to be like that. There is a way out. Your life can be better. You don't have to be alone, sitting in your room playing video games all day. It doesn't have to be like that. It's possible to get out. It's possible to get out of it. And you might not know how, and it might seem daunting, and it might seem impossible. I know for a fact it's daunting. I know for a fact it does seem impossible, but it's not. Having been there, having been in that spot, I can tell you for certain it is not impossible to get out of it. It might take some time, and it might take some reframing how you think about things and changing some of your beliefs around. That alone is an immense effort, because we have a tendency to hold on to our beliefs with conviction, whether or not they're right or wrong. And especially at that age, right? At like sophomore, like just young, teenage, high school years, you're 99% wrong. That's just kind of how it goes. Anyway, that's the point. Life doesn't have to suck. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.